Let's remind ourselves what our first goal is. We need to feed our recommendation model the freshest data that we have available, and ideally neither you nor I are sitting by a computer manually hitting the refresh button in GCS or repeat load job in BigQuery. That's no fun. As you saw, Cloud Composer will command the GCP services that we need to run. But Cloud Composer is simply a serverless environment on which an open source workflow tool runs. That workflow tool is called Apache Airflow. I feel like between TensorFlow, Dialogflow, Dataflow, and Airflow, if you're gonna be working on the next ML package, it's likely to end in something flow. Anyways, bad joke. How Airflow works is you write up an ordered set of tasks as part of what's called a DAG. More on that in a minute. And then you watch as Airflow invokes those other GCP services, like the BigQuery to GCS export job here, or a new Cloud ML Engine training job that's kicked off here, or a deployment of a newly retrained or trained model to App Engine for serving as the API endpoint. Just a few of the great features of these Airflow DAGs that you're going to build are the tolerance for failure, automatic retrying of failed jobs, and those data health checks that I alluded to a little bit earlier that you can program directly into your workflow. Now, the heart of any workflow, and by the way, I use workflow, pipeline, and DAG a little bit interchangeably, is that DAG. A DAG, or directed acyclic graph, is a set of tasks and special operators that will allow you to programmatically and periodically schedule cool stuff to happen. Directed means that there's a specified dependency flow. First do this task, then task B, then task C. And acyclic means it can't be a feedback loop into itself like a circle. Acyclic means non-circular. The stuff that's happening in this particular DAG are 4 tasks that update our training data, export it, retrain our model, and then redeploy it. I'm purposely being ambiguous by using the word stuff because you can tell your DAG to pretty much do anything that you need it to do. Here it's sending tasks to BigQuery, GCS, and Cloud ML Engine. But another DAG could send email notification when it launches a Cloud Dataflow job, or spin up a Google Kubernetes cluster, or run multiple ad hoc queries against a BigQuery dataset. And you could even trigger a completely separate DAG based on the results of the first one running and completing. Before we go too far into Cloud Composer specifics, I wanted to share this useful analogy. Cloud Composer is to Apache Airflow as Cloud Machine Learning Engine is to TensorFlow. Both Cloud Composer and CMLE are serverless and fully managed integration layers to the Google Cloud Platform, so you don't have to worry about what hardware specs your Airflow or TensorFlow code is running on. Building any workflow in Cloud Composer consists of these 4 steps, and building an ML workflow for a recommendation engine is no different. We'll start by previewing the actual Cloud Composer environment. Once you use the command line or GCP Web UI to launch a Cloud Composer instance, you'll be met with a screen like this. Keep in mind that you can have multiple Cloud Composer environments, and within each environment, you can have a separate Apache Airflow instance that can have 0 to many DAGs inside of it. An important note here is that sometimes you'll be required to edit environmental variables for your workflows, like specifying your specific GCP project account. Normally, you would not do that at the Cloud Composer level, but instead do it at the actual Apache Airflow level, which is what we'll show you in the next demo. Again, generally, I'm only on the Cloud Composer page here to create new environments before I launch directly into the Apache Airflow web server. To access the Airflow admin UI, where you can monitor and interact with your workflows, you'll click on the link underneath the Airflow web server. The second box you see here is the DAGs folder, which is where the code of your actual workflows will be stored. The DAGs folder for each Airflow instance is simply a GCS bucket that's automatically created for you when you launch your Cloud Composer instance. Here's where you're going to upload your DAG files, which you're going to write in Python, and bring your first workflow to life visually inside of Airflow. Let's take a quick look at a demo of what the simplest DAG looks like inside of the Airflow UI. So now we get to see what Cloud Composer looks like, and we'll run a very simple DAG that's going to do a little bit of a work for us inside of GCP. So this is the Cloud Composer environment. How you actually get here is through the navigation menu, all the way at the bottom. You're already familiar with all the big data products. Maybe Cloud Composer is new to you. And you can see the little icon there is just putting all the different pieces together. I thought for a while, like, what is the T supposed to represent? But it's different puzzle pieces. That'll take you here. In your lab, you're not going to have any of these managed Apache Airflow environments created yet. So the first thing, as you'd imagine you want to do, is go to create. Now, of course, there's a corresponding shell command line that you can actually run using the CLI to actually create this, but you can use the UI as well. So here we just give the composer environment a name. You can specify the number of nodes. Again, this is all run on Kubernetes behind the scenes. Mandatory that you specify a location, probably closest to you. Optionally a zone. And I leave the rest of the infrastructure blank here. Now you can specify environmental variables or other labels. I also leave those at the default values. Now the big aha moment is currently, at the time of this recording, each composer instance takes about 10 or 15 minutes to spin up. So here is where you can look through the rest of the lab, the rest of the documentations. That's why I have quite a few of these other environments available for us to demo in. So I'm actually going to look at the demo composer environment I created a little bit earlier. So as you saw before, you've got the actual web server to take you into the Airflow UI. You've got the folder to the DAGs. So the first thing that we want to do is actually take a look at the DAGs, which again is just a GCS bucket. There's no objects in there already. And the DAG, what we're actually going to be creating as part of our workflow today, is just going to be a BigQuery related DAG for the top 100 Stack Overflow posts for a certain time period. And that's actually just an example I took from the documentation for Cloud Dataflow. So here you can see it's just a simple bqnotify.py, and it is actually, this one is set up to send an email summary based on the results of the BigQuery query showing what's the most popular Stack Overflow post. So we have our bucket. Again, this is auto-generated GCS bucket, uploading the files. I've got sample.dag.py. Once that's uploaded, we head back into our environment. You can click on the web server or click on the actual name. If you click on the name, it'll give you a little bit more metadata about the environment. So you can see this is the Cloud Composer's name, demo-composer. And you can see that here's the actual GKE cluster ID. But the two links that were also on the previous page that are really, really important is the link to the GCS bucket, where we can start uploading those Python DAG files. And we'll go into much more great detail on how to create those DAG files. But the one you want to really bookmark is the Airflow web UI. And after we authenticate, you'll see it's thinking, and maybe refresh a few times, and it'll realize that, hey, there's DAGs inside of the DAG folder. Now, here's the interesting part. As I mentioned before, you might be putting environmental variables that are referenced by your code. For example, this says sample.dag.py is expecting something called a GCS bucket. That's essentially, a parameter for whatever your GCS bucket is going to be. So in order to satisfy this and get the DAG to show up, we're going to go to admin, variables, and here's where you can create environmental variables that can be referenced by one or all of your DAGs. So here we specify a GCS bucket. I'm going to go ahead and just create a very simple one. Create a new bucket. Call this one just something unique. Create the bucket. Bucket's created. Now we go back in here, specify that. Now it's vital to understand that depending upon, this is a variable name. Depending upon your code, sometimes you're going to have to put the GS Google Storage / there. I just know offhand that this one already concatenates in that as part of the DAG. So I'm going to leave that alone. And we're going to save that. And we're going to see what other environmental variables are required by going to DAGs. And then we have another one that says email does not exist. Maybe this is the email that's going to send the summary to. So we can, again, go to admin variables, create, email, and then we can just do whatever your email is when you're actually creating this. And I'll tell you why I'm just doing a bogus email when we get into actually running the DAG. Now let's go back into DAG, see if there's any other parameters. We need the GCS bucket. Our project, GCS project, of course, we can just get from our home screen. For your QuickLabs accounts, it's just going to be your QuickLabs project ID. And that's where we're actually going to be running this workflow within. Boom, after all three of those, you'll see that your DAG will now appear. This is the Composer sample BQ notify. A couple of different things about the UI here. You can pause your DAG from automatically running. If you have an automatic scheduler set up, we'll go into the different types of schedules that you can automatically set up. And then what I do is you give it about a minute or 30 seconds. Then when you refresh this, you'll see a cute notification message, but then you'll also see all the links that are available to you. So you can say this looks like it's running once a month. We can take a look. What I'd like to do is take a look at the code first. So you can click into the DAG. Different ways of representing it. The graph view. This is the directed acyclic graphs. You can see that it's doing a lot of things. Making a BigQuery data set, querying it, exporting the questions to GCS, emailing out the summary, while in tandem it's writing the, or querying BigQuery and getting the most popular question queried, and then reading that out and including that in the email summary as well. So the DAG view here is great. Also, you can just check out the code view. So you can see that at the very top of this code, it highlights, hey, by the way, you're going to have to specify these 3 environmental variables. So if you wanted to avoid the attack of the pop-up notifications, you could have just read here and then see that it actually relied on these 3 environmental variables inside of Airflow. This is the DAG. Again, you can see just a little bit of what's going on here, where it's actually different parts of the different tasks are running. This is the actual query, which queries the public Stack Overflow posts. Don't worry about too much of the DAG structure. We're going to go to that in much greater detail. But this is just essentially a Python file with a list of dependencies at the end for what tasks get run first. So now if we actually wanted to run this, one of the things that we could do is go back to our DAGs all the way on the right. If we don't want to wait for it to run within 28 days, we're going to trigger the DAG with this little icon here. So trigger it. Are you sure you want to run it? Yes, let's go ahead and run it. And then quickly, what I like to do is I'll go back into the DAG, I'll go into the graph view, and I'll start refreshing like crazy. So you want to look for the colored border in the status or the state. So you're hovering over it and you see it's state and queued. It doesn't refresh automatically. So when you're refreshing this, you can see immediately lighter green means it's running. So it's making a BigQuery data set. And if you're following along very quickly, I just have BigQuery open here for my particular project. I'm going to refresh that and see if it actually created it. Boom, there's the BigQuery dataset it just created. So we've got no tables in there yet, or else you'd have a little arrow here. And this is the Airflow BQ notified dataset with this suffix of the particular date. So let's go back, let's refresh this, let's see where it is now. So now the BigQuery dataset has been created as we saw. It's running the BQ, one of those SQL queries that looks for the recent Stack Overflow posts, and it's going to be populating those into 2 separate tables into BigQuery. So as you can see, that just finished because, again, it's just a simple call to BigQuery, and BigQuery is going to run it really, really fast. And we're going to go ahead and refresh BigQuery. We're going to see how many tables do we have actually in there stored, if any. Boom, those 2 queries have ran, and now we have results. The most popular post for Stack Overflow for that time period is this article title with over 340,000 views. And then here are some of the recent questions. As you can see, the most popular just takes the top 1. So we have our same title here, and then the rest, as you can see in that view count there. So immediately we have a BigQuery dataset that didn't exist before, and we just ran some ad hoc SQL queries against it. So let's go back into Airflow and see what we're doing. It's exporting the recent questions to GCS, so it's dumping them to the bucket as well. And as you can see, we have green, 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 green. Dark green means all of those nodes have completed. And then if you notice, there's a yellow retry all the way at the end for the email summary. So it looks like maybe it failed. There was something that's going on with it. And I'll tell you, the reason why I did test, you might be thinking that this is failing because you did an improper email test@test.com. And that's not actually the case. You can inspect these things clicking on a particular node and clicking on view log. And you can actually see the error. So it's saying, hey, there's no module or utility named SendGrid, or it's going to give you an unauthorized email error. And that's because you need to actually set up, in order to send emails out of GCP, this is something new that happened in the last year to prevent spam from folks creating these bots, is you need to create an API key with SendGrid, which is one of the partners that we have. So unfortunately, we're not going to be getting any emails, which is fine. The email body would have just simply been this. I'll show you. All the way at the bottom, you can see, hey, we analyzed Stack Overflow post from this date, which is parameterized to this date, and it has this view count. And then the most popular question was this, and it's pulling this from the GCS bucket, the file that was actually dumped into there. But again, if you wanted to actually get that email, you can sign up to SendGrid and put in the API in there as well. But the big success, as you can see, is it very quickly created this data set inside of BigQuery with the 2 tables that as you see populated there. So it's got those BigQuery operators going. And then the cool part is, if we exit out of the code here, you can go back to the schedule and you can see like, all right, well, every 28 days or about every month, this workflow is just going to run, and it's going to dump in a table inside of BigQuery with the most popular posts, and you don't have to do anything else. It'll just run automatically behind the scenes. And then if you put in an email, if the workflow ever fails, you can actually have it send a failure email. We're going to go through how to actually create those DAG files, how do you set up a recurring schedule or an event triggered schedule. But all you need to know the basics of this so far is just upload a Python file, deal with any dependencies for those environmental variables that'll give you those notifications, and then you actually get the name of your DAG showing up here, 1 DAG per line, and then you can interact with it with some of the quick links here. All right, that is the Cloud Composer very fast demo. Stay tuned for just much more granularity for everything that you see here.